Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. It is exactly 2 o'clock on Thursday, April 12th, and we are here to convene the Charter School Application Review Committee as per our School Board Policy 9800. And today we are here for the capacity interview for the application submitted by Somerset Academy West Vero. Thank you for being here, and we'll do some formal introductions in a minute. My name is Bruce Green. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Technology, Assessment, and Human Resources, and also the Charter School Liaison for the school district. And today and for the next couple meetings, we'll be serving as the chair of the Application Review Committee, which you see here. And we have our guests from Somerset Academy here. Thank you for being here. Today's meeting is being televised and live, so I'll ask when you're speaking, you can hear me over the microphone, just pull that forward and make sure that the switch is pulled on and that we're on the mic. That way our viewing audience can hear it. A lot of times they can see it, but if they can't hear the voices, we get a few calls after the meeting. So just pull the microphones close. I'll try to remind people that's for everybody in the room, share among you. It's also being streamed on our district's YouTube channel, and you can go and get that afterwards on YouTube. Somerset Academy of West Vero submitted a new application for a new charter school on February 1st of this year with a projected opening in August of 2019. And today, members of the Charter School Application Review Committee are going to have an opportunity to just kind of hear from you a little bit about the school and the application, and then ask some clarifying questions and go through the various sections. And before we begin, a few housekeeping items. We'll go no longer than 2 hours, so we'll stop at 4 o'clock. And during this time, we'll give you an opportunity, we'll start with you, give an opportunity to just kind of share the vision, the school, talk about it in general. And then we'll go through the sections committee. I'll just start with section 1. Various sections apply to different people, food service, curriculum, finance. So I'll turn it over to someone in that area first if you have any questions, and then if that area of expertise either has questions or not, once you're done, then I'll just open it up to anybody on the committee who might have a clarifying question or want more information or ask about something. It's a very large application. The committee members have had it for several weeks now and been reading it, and then once this is over, they'll have a few more weeks to continue reading it and just kind of take this in as one of the inputs. And then the next time we will meet, we'll be here again, committee. We will be meeting 30th at 1 p.m. in the Joe N. Idolette Teacher Education Center to share findings and formulate a recommendation for the superintendent to bring forward. So let's go ahead with that. Let's go ahead and do some introductions. I've already introduced myself, so I'll start with our guests. And if you could just speak into the microphone, we'll go around the room, name, title, and your capacity on either side, what you serve in your role.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you so much for having us here. My name is Kendall Artusi, and I work for Academica, which is the support service provider for Somerset Academy West Vero. And my role in this is to support the board in preparing the application and any questions that you may have with regard to that.
Hello. My name is Vanessa Mancebo. I also work for Academica, and I am also ESP support for Somerset Academy, Inc.
Hi, I'm Adri Lima. I work with Academica as well, and I assist Somerset Academy, or they request us to assist them in drafting their applications and assisting throughout the process. So we're here for support on anything they may ask from us.
My name is Todd German. I'm the Vice Chair of Somerset Academy and look forward to today. I remember a lot of these faces from being here a couple of years ago. So.
Yeah, we weren't in this building, though. We were in our old building, if you recall. Anna, where's Anna? She remembered.
Hi, I'm Anna Diaz, Somerset Board Secretary, and I'm here also on behalf of Somerset to discuss the application that's on the table today.
Charles Gibson, General Counsel to Somerset Academy, Inc.
Richard Marino with Building Hope, and I'm a consultant to the board on finance and budget.
Hi, Liliana Salazar, a consultant to the board as well. I handle special education, student support, and anything that having to do with elementary curriculum and support as well.
Hi, good afternoon. My name's Tara Barber. I'm an assistant principal at one of the Somersets down south, an elementary school, and I'm here to offer curriculum support as well.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Sarah Belos-Fai. I am a literacy coach and curriculum specialist with Somerset Academy. I'm excited to be here.
The Administrative Secretary to Mr. Christopher Taylor, Assessment Accountability Department here at the School District of Indian River County.
I'm Dana Leslie, and I'm a data specialist here at the School District of Indian River, and I'm here to take notes.
Nick Westenberger, Director of Facilities Planning.
Patrick McCarty, Food and Nutrition Services Director for the district.
Heather Clark, Director of Exceptional Student Education.
Kelly Basora, I'm the Executive Director of Elementary Education.
Dr. Peggy Jones, Executive Director for Secondary.
Pamela Dampier, Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction.
John Teskey, Assistant Superintendent of Operations.
Barton Morrison, I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Employee Services. I reviewed sections 19, 20, and 21 of the application.
Good afternoon. I'm Suzanne DeGresta. I'm School Board Legal Counsel.
Hello, I'm Chris Taylor. I'm the Director of Assessment and Accountability.
Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And on this side, when we get to it, I will ask to share the microphone, because even though it'll be loud in the room, it doesn't pick it up on the YouTube. So you guys will have to, if you can, pass it down and share the microphone. Everybody should have just a brief agenda. We've done our welcome and introductions. We talked about the purpose and process of the overview. The next item will just be an opportunity to introduce yourself, talk about the school, the vision, a little bit. I would maybe recommend 20 or 30 minutes. It's up to you, but we're going to have 2 hours. It may be very brief, and then the application could speak to itself. Could be 2 minutes. But I wouldn't take the whole time. Everybody has to ask questions. And then I'm just going to go through the sections and start with the area of expertise, see if they have any questions, see if anybody else on the committee has questions, and then we'll adjourn by 4 o'clock or earlier, just depending on how we get through the application. Any questions about the agenda? Okay, well, let's jump right in. And
Sure.
Don, I'm not sure. Anna, you
I
want
was going to say, I think we'll probably keep it very brief.
Okay.
Anna's going to give because we're going to go over all this.
Absolutely.
And you guys have been pouring through this and enjoying it. So Anna will give a brief introduction, and then we'll hit almost every point, I'm sure.
Perfect.
So we're here today to present our application for a charter school to operate a charter school here at Indian River County. We plan to open a school with approximately 400 students K through 6 and eventually ramp up to approximately 900 students K through 8. The mission of Somerset Academy West Vero is to maximize student achievement and foster the development of responsible, self-directed, lifelong learners in a safe and enriching learning environment. And our vision is to provide an equitable, high-quality education for all students. Today we brought a team together to hopefully address any questions that you may have regarding our application and to clarify any different concerns you may have. So we've already introduced ourselves, but this is our team, and I'm very happy that they're here with us today. So if you have any questions, please let us know.
Okay, great. So, and you do have a nice executive summary that outlines that at the beginning as well, and I'm sure the committees, but just for the viewing audience out there that haven't had the opportunity to read through the application, it gives them a nice little introduction of who you are and why you're here. So the first section, the educational plan, I have a feeling will focus on curriculum and instruction quite a bit, but so we'll just start with section 1. This may be open to everybody. Mission, guiding principles, and purpose. So we'll start with section 1, and your binders are nicely tabbed. So under educational plan, Ms. Dampier or anybody on your team have any questions, clarifying information that you'd like under the mission, guiding principles, and purpose?
I just have a general question. When we look at your core principles, the curriculum will be research-based, and I guess we are also over PD here at Indian River County, and I want to know when you select your teachers, what kind of PD will you offer as you open the school, and what will be the continuity of the PD?
So the PD is going to be based on the curriculum that we selected for And it, of course, has to be research-based, and it will be always aimed at ensuring that all of our teachers are prepared to deliver that curriculum as adopted by the state. Do you want specific to
Yes.
the programs?
Yes,
Okay, so we brought some of our experts here who can speak to that.
So for the curriculum program that is chosen, I believe is Wonders and also collections for language arts and reading. So we would need to make sure that the teachers, if they are new to those programs, would have to go through a new educator, new to those programs. For if we have teachers who have already taught those programs before, generally there's a refresher training. There would be the iReady, which I believe is not something that is brand new to this county, but iReady is a program that we use in the reading as a supplemental and also for progress monitoring. Data chats, data collect kinds of schedules are set up at the beginning of the year, so there's PD in that. There's also something that we do within Somerset, which is nice, is that for new teachers, we have kind of a new teacher academy where we onboard them a little bit earlier, help them kind of get used to what we do, and there are a number of things that go along with that.
In addition, I also wanted to say that in regards to our special populations, such as gifted and special education, we do access all of the professional development provided by our Florida's discretionary projects, such as Fiddlers through HRD. They're phenomenal in providing PD on access, if we have any students that are on access points, differentiating of instruction, they're phenomenal as well. So we do access them. We also access our FIN projects in regards to inclusion, and if we have any students that might have a specific exceptionality, for example, autism, then we do work with over in Miami, UMNSU CARD, but with the CARD Center as well. So we make every effort to work very closely with our state and access everything that is available to all of our teachers in regards to PD.
I'd like to also add that Project Lead the Way has an extensive professional development program, as well as the global competency component would be used through the Asian Society.
One of the things in your core principles, you talk about highly qualified staff is necessary. Would you define that for me, please?
Highly qualified would be certified by the state of Florida to teach in their area. Correct.
Anybody else?
I have one. Yes, can you explain to us how you came up with your vision and mission?
The vision and mission to educate students, to provide better education for our kids. I guess it's just a vision of all of our charter schools. We really want to see improvement in education across the board, and we find opportunities to do this in many locations. And as an educator myself, I've always strived to improve the education of the children that I've taught, and I think it's important that we expand these programs to reach many children across the state and even across the U.S.
And I have one more.
I'm sorry. I believe the original mission and vision was put together by the founding principals also, which was 20 years ago. And as we're going through a reaccreditation process, we're starting now. We're actually reevaluating our mission and vision to see how we want to make sure it's clear for the next 5, 10, forever years, which is including, all our stakeholders, our principals, our board, obviously, our parents, our families.
And is this application specific to Indian River, or has this application been submitted to other districts as well?
This one is specific to Indian River.
In one of the sections, you talk about Tier 2, and that students who are struggling would be receiving supports from a qualified interventionist. What do you decide is the qualified interventionist? What are the criteria for qualifying somebody for that role?
We choose interventionists that are certified in the state of Florida to educate students, and they're qualified.
So a teacher certification?
So typically a teacher certification.
Okay.
They conduct the interventions, yes.
Got it.
In addition, we do partner with Chris, and we ensure that our teachers, especially our interventionists, are having access to our Chris training. Many of our teachers throughout the state have been provided this access, and so we do partner with Chris so we can get them trained. Thank you.
Moving on to section 2, or how are we doing?
Yeah, I don't, were there?
Are we doing it in order?
In
Yeah.
order, yeah.
So we're still in section 1, or we're moving to section 2?
Well, that was still section 1. Does anybody else have any questions on?
Just on the teacher training and mentoring is constant throughout the year. As you open the new school, how will you be selecting your mentors?
Well, I wanted to add, and I think that we touched on a little bit, about the network of Somerset. I think that it's important to understand that this network of schools has an incredible mentoring program built in within the network itself. So these principals are working with their staff to have people growing up through the system. So we have someone here who's an assistant principal who will become a principal one day, and teachers that move into the administrative positions after having been teachers and shown an interest in that. So the mentoring program within Somerset itself is an incredible opportunity for anyone who's a part of that network. So I think that mentoring program is really a grassroots program that's been going on now for 20 years within this network. And that is the mentoring program. They travel when necessary. They have retreats, they have trainings, they have chats. There is a huge network of support for the staff that work for the Somerset network.
All right, and just thinking about time and all the sections, we'll move on to section 2, targeted population and student body.
I had a question in reference to, it says, the school will actively recruit to ensure that the student population will reflect Indian River Academy, Indian River County as a whole. How will you ensure that the percentage of minority students attend your school as it relates to the SEG order?
So we will do our best within the law to ensure that we recruit in areas that will help us to mirror the demographics of the areas in which we serve.
Can you give me some examples of how you will recruit? Because you said actively recruit.
We can send out mailers, flyers, we can go door to door. There's all different ways that we can recruit to ensure that we have those demographics.
We've also historically worked with a lot of community organizations. Somerset works with local churches, with community centers, Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCA, whatever is available in the community here. That is typically what the schools do in terms of recruiting for students.
If I could add, when we were here last time, the desegregation order was quite a topic of discussion. So we've done a lot of work to familiarize ourselves and study it. Our lawyers have looked at it, and we've been following the challenges the districts had with it and looking to, I guess, modify that order. And so we would have to work hand in hand with you to make sure that what we do goes in line with what you're trying to attain as well.
And I had a question in reference to page 3 with the chart that's there. I saw a chart at the top that had the schools that were listed. Can you tell me what that means? I mean, I know we have more than 49 males that attend Citrus, so is that the recruitment method, or are those your numbers that you anticipate
I
for
believe
those
those are
schools?
reflecting
Page 3.
percentages.
There's a chart.
Percentages.
Those are percentages. It says at the top of the chart, numbers are reported in percentages. So those are percentages of the schools that we selected that would be within 5 miles of the identified proposed site.
Then I had a question on page 5. It said, of the 7 schools listed, used for the purposes of our study, Rosewood Elementary Magnet is currently over capacity. Just curious of where did you get that information?
It came from the 5-year plan from the district.
But is that, because it sounds like we're not over capacity at Rosewood. So I was just curious of how you came up with that number.
It's actually listed on your 5-year capacity plan, your utilization plan. That's where that number came from.
Also, you talked about Glendale is projected to continue to utilize 18 relocatable classrooms as stated in the district's 5-year plan. Where did you get that as well?
It's also in the I can forward you the document.
I have the 5-year plan, but as relevant to today.
Yeah, I only have access to what you guys have available online, so.
Do we have 18 portables at? No, so that's just curious. I was just wondering because we don't have 18 portables at.
So the plan is not accurate?
The plan's not accurate then, is that what you're saying?
It sounds like,
I mean, the plan that I got these numbers from did come from the document that the district has available online. And if it's not accurate now, I'm only as good as the information that's available online.
you don't recall what year it was, do you?
I
mean, it
probably
may
have it right here in
be
my,
that It's an old.
I have it in my
older
documents.
plan. Okay.
Will you be providing any transportation?
If necessary, yes.
Yeah, there's probably a section that we'll get to in section 17. Yeah, but it's under probably target population and student body as well.
I know
so-
there's a transportation plan
There's a
farther on.
right.
Yeah, okay, so we'll dive into it a little bit deeper when we get there. Anything else on section 2, the target population and student body? Good? Okay. Section 3, educational program design.
Excuse me, would you like for me to go back and give you the document name of the one that I used for this information?
Sure.
Oh, sure.
It's the 2017-18 Indian River Work Plan District Report, Final Board Approved, 10/10/17.
Thank you. Okay, educational program design. Any questions? Section?
I have one.
Mr. Taylor?
So in your application, you mentioned that you're going to use a mid-year assessment. What does that look like?
So at this time, most of our schools use the iReady mid-year assessment, but we also have district-based assessments, and our Somerset cohort of teachers, we often have principal chat sessions, and we look at different ways that we can even create our own that are all aligned to the Florida standards. However, typically, iReady is used as the mid-year
As a mid-year.
assessment.
Also, the application mentions that students that receive a level 1 or 2, they need to have an additional diagnostic assessment. Is that iReady that you're referring to?
Actually, yes, iReady does provide a diagnostic assessment tool as well.
Okay.
That also may refer to students who are in that 1 or 2 category are always in a additional reading or language arts block. And those programs generally have additional diagnostics, so the entire school would be doing the iReady, but in those courses in particular, the programs, for example, inside, there's a diagnostic component there as well.
So in addition to iReady?
Right, in addition. And of course, if FAIR or Flickers, would, depending on the grade level, is an additional progress monitoring diagnostic used.
You talk about, you write in here about a screener as well. Would that fall in the same category that you
Yes.
spoke to?
The screening would, depending on the grade level, it depends, the Flickers used or FAIR, those are screening, progress monitoring assessments. And they're done several times a year, so there's screening, progress monitoring, and then the end-of-year assessment.
Anybody else?
Yes, on page 9, under your vision, actions, and policies, you talk about using technology in all content areas. What will the school look like with technology when you open?
Well, we expect to have at least Promethean-style boards or what they call smart boards in every classroom. In addition to that, students should have access to desktop, computer top, laptops. There's all different kinds. The technology section actually moves faster than we can even think of them. So we're very fortunate that we have a network of as strong as Somerset that has all of this stuff in place, and we basically check to see what would work best in a place like Indian River.
I just have one more question, Mr. Green, on page 10.
Mm-hmm.
If parents do not contribute to 30 volunteer hours, what happens then?
So they're encouraged, not required. So we encourage that they do so that we think parent involvement is very important. So that's why we encourage that, and we give them that threshold to give them an idea of what we expect.
We also try to come up with creative ways of what that can look like.
Right.
Can't always be, people coming to the school or something
Correct.
like
So
that.
just to follow up, I mean, you encourage, there's not a consequence or something if the parent doesn't do 30 hours.
Absolutely not.
And the reason for that question is if they don't do the 30 hours, you don't dismiss a student.
Oh, absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
No.
Okay, still in section 3, anybody else? Patrick, nothing for the education, I'm just kidding. Okay, let's move on to section 4, curriculum and instruction design.
Oh, I do have something on page 16, I'm sorry.
Page 16,
Yeah. Yeah.
forget the microphone for.
It's hard to hear. Actually, 15 and then 16, it says, character education is infused in social studies to foster values and virtues of responsible world citizens. What character education program are you using? Is there a particular program?
Well, right now, many of our schools use the PBIS, the Positive Behavior Intervention Supports, and it's a great model to use to help support character education in social studies.
This also
And
has,
what is your behavior plan for Tier 1 for the behavior component of
The response to,
PBIs?
are you talking about the response to intervention behavior plan?
What program, like we have for academics, which would be your core, what would be your core for your behavior component of Tier 1 of RTI?
So again, PBIS would be the program we would use. The strategies within the PBIS would be used as Tier 1 supports and Tier 2 supports if necessary. And then we would follow up to ensure that our students are making progress towards their goals and adjust as necessary.
And typically within the PBIS program, you know, we're looking at always modeling appropriate behavior, but at the same time rewarding and reinforcing the appropriate behavior as well. Many of our schools will use buttons. So if they've had a phenomenal day, they'll reward them that way. They earn tokens or points so that at the end of the week or at the end of the month, they can, you know, purchase items for their appropriate behavior. We specifically target children that are having difficulties making the right choices so that we want to make sure that we incentivize when they do make the right choice, that they are positively reinforced. So all of that, it's this whole climate and school culture about, you know, just being very positive, modeling how we need to be acting with the students, having the students model as well, having good relationships with them, and all of that just adds to that appropriate behavior overall. And then if we do have students where that Tier 1 and that Tier 2 is not working, then obviously we're going to start looking at a functional assessment of behavior and possibly creating a behavior intervention plan for them at the Tier 3 to see that we can target and specifically say, is it an escape? Are they trying to gain attention, involve the parents, and see how we can extinguish this inappropriate behavior?
I have a question around that as well. You say in this, on page 16, behavior assessments at the Tier 1 include observation data, parent conference records, and disciplinary data. What do you mean when you say the parent conference records in terms of behavioral assessments?
So that would be the notes taken during a parent conference in regards to the behaviors.
Yeah, because many times what we've seen is that we might have children that there's things going on at home, and therefore that information is so relevant to us because it's very difficult as a child to, like we as adults, we might have something going on at home, but we get to work, we can compartmentalize and disconnect. For children, that's very difficult to do. So having that information really helps us be able to cater to that need.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Jones, one more?
On page 14, when we're looking at the middle school program design, I see that your intensive courses would be your intensive reading, ELA levels 1 and 2. So reading is not part of the core, that is just if they need to have the reading in level 1 or 2?
No, that would be in addition to their regular ELA course. So if they're
So
level
in
1 or
addition to their
2,
language,
right, if
yeah.
they're level 1 or 2 in the FSA, then they are placed into an intensive reading course.
Okay,
If you notice right before, it's kind of like a table from page 13 that moves on to page 14. So the ELA is
Right.
in addition.
Okay. All right, just looking at the time, let's move on to student performance. Not seeing any other questions on curriculum, student performance, and start with Mr. Taylor.
All right, so the application mentions a lot of technology. Can you tell us what the ratio of students to devices you expect to have?
I'm sorry, could you ask the question
Sure.
again?
Can you describe to us or tell us what is the ratio of students to devices you will have? Is it going to be 1-to-1, 1-to-5, 1-to-10?
So ideally, one-to-one would be probably the goal. However, financially and depending on, as the years go on, technology tends to get less expensive. So we are working towards that goal and hopefully we'll achieve it soon. However, technology also changes. So a lot of times you'll see one device can be better used by several children and you may want to invest in that. So as a plan overall, we believe that every child should have access to technology at least for some part of the day.
We also assist the board in applying for the startup grant. It's a competitive grant that allows for the purchases of technology. And we usually are very good we have a very good team, and we're very successful in retaining that. So that helps a lot as well.
And in regards to our students of special populations, if we do feel that a student that has an IEP is in need of any type of assistive technology, we do go through an assistive technology plan and see if that is something that needs to be added as a supplementary aid or service under their IEP in order for them to access FAPE.
I had a question.
Okay, Ms. Gilchrist.
In this particular section, you've also referenced just generally some minority teacher recruitment efforts, and you've said one of the avenues that you'll use is recruiting from historically Black universities, which is great. Do you have some other strategies for minority recruiting that you can share? Of teachers, minority recruiting of teachers.
Well, again, I think using the recruitment strategies that we actually reviewed the minutes from your meetings to address these same issues. So we would certainly want to collaborate with the district to find out what strategies you're using, and we would continue to use strategies that we currently use with our other schools. We do attend quite a few college fairs around the country, actually, to recruit teachers from all over the country. And this approach of addressing the historically Black universities is one way for us to reach out to minority populations for coming right out of college. And then, of course, just using the standard recruitment tools that we use to recruit all teachers would be put in place.
You stole my question from Human Resources. That's
sorry.
okay.
I'm sorry.
It's all right. Anything else on student performance, section 5? Okay. Section 6, exceptional student.
Yes, I just have a couple of questions. In section 6, you indicated that the school's total enrollment will mirror that of the district, and currently our total enrollment of students with disabilities is approximately 15%. Tell me a little bit about how you may advertise or get the word out to families in terms of what programs that you offer students with disabilities and how you will mirror the current percentage.
That's a great question. And let me tell you why. Because unfortunately, many times nationally, charter schools are viewed as schools that are not accepting children with special needs. And I think that's what's so beautiful about this Somerset organization, that they made a very big emphasis on ensuring that they had a person that has a lot of expertise in special ed to ensure that we are not only attracting students that have different special needs, but at the same time that we have someone that can prepare and work with our teachers in order to address the special needs. Because when you think about it, that's the biggest issue, that they get very anxious. What do I do with this child? And and that's where you have the issue. So typically we are an open enrollment school. Obviously, if a family comes in with a child that is special ed and it's very obvious to us, we do not make a big deal about it. On the other hand, we embrace it. We want to make sure that we let the family know that these are the types of programs that we have. This is how we can service. We obviously abide by the IEP because that is the document. And therefore, we look at the IEP, we sit with the parents, and we tell them this is the way that we would implement the IEP. So I wouldn't say that we specifically put in our marketing, we want all special ed, because that would sort of not make it an open enrollment process, right? But I think what happens is that the Somerset network has a phenomenal reputation about working with all types of children, and I think that starts trickling out into the neighborhood, and then they'll realize, oh my gosh, and the parents themselves start talking and bringing their children over. But once they get there, they're treated really so well that the word gets out.
Which leads me to my next question. Professional development for your teachers. I know that you mentioned your work with the discretionary projects, Fiddlers and Finn. Can you tell me a little bit more about professional development that you provide your teachers and staff?
Absolutely, and what happens is that we typically wait till the very beginning of the year, probably around August, where we have really good idea of how many exceptionalities we have represented. We have schools all over the state of Florida. There are some schools where, believe it or not, we have a high concentration of students with autism. There are schools where we have a high concentration of students with dyslexia, which would typically fall under specific learning disabilities. So based on the needs of those schools, then Somerset reaches out to me, and then that's where I sort of cater what type of PD they need. We always push Chris, because you can never go wrong with Chris. We push Kagan because we want to make sure that with the cooperative learning, not only the general ed students are benefiting, but the special ed students benefit even more, because they're going to want to participate in a group, not to participate individually. And on top of that, we're also looking at multisensory approaches. So you're looking at Orton Gillingham, if that's something that's needed. We've done that type of training. And then anything in regards to math and computations, we always try to include as much manipulatives as possible.
Okay, excellent. You also mentioned Florida Inclusion Network and your relationship with that project. Can you tell me about the inclusive scheduling process or flexible scheduling, if that occurs on your campuses with your
Absolutely,
teams?
and that's what Finn is, they're so wonderful about that. And basically what we do is when we first creating a master schedule, the first students we put on little Post-its. I'm very old school, I don't know about all of you, but I'm very old school and I need to have everything very visual, and I use little Post-its. And our students with exceptionalities are the ones that we have to staff in first. Because if we're doing push-in, if we're doing collaboration, we want to make sure that we're grouping them within the same level, and then we're using the special ed teacher to be able to provide the specialized instruction. If we have a group of students that require resource, then we're looking at maybe clumping K1 together, 2, 3 together. But the only way to do that is to put those special ed kids in first, and then be able to then work that schedule around. And Finn is phenomenal with that. They really help us with that.
In specialized instruction, are there certain research-based, evidence-based strategies that you utilize specifically with your students with disabilities?
Yes, certainly the reading strategies from Chris were very big. We push that one a lot. Multisensory with the Orton Gilliam, that's also a very evidence-based. Those are the two that we really push the most.
Okay, great.
I actually had one question back in section, I guess it was page 41, sorry about that. Under the goal area, the goal is 80% of students will have made learning gains as measured by iReady. Is it a 1-year gain as decided by iReady, or is it just a gain?
Yes, actually, iReady actually has its own metric to determine whether or not the child has made adequate growth. To consider
So for a 1-year
of
growth, yeah,
correct.
that's what I just, were we just talking like a 1-point gain, or we're calling this a 1 year's
Yes, and
growth?
there's even a metric to let you know mid-year whether or not they're on target to make that 1-year gain.
Okay, great, I just didn't see that in there, so I wanted to make sure that's what we were saying.
And real quick to add, we do like to work very closely with the special ed department from each of the districts that we work with. I used to, in my former position, I used to run Miami-Dade for special education, and I'm very cognizant of your LEA profile. So if there's anything that we could help as a charter school to assist in making sure that those ends becomes Ys, because those would always bother me as a past director. We want to be at the table. We want to be a part of those conversations so we can assist.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, the next section is English language learners. Questions in English language learners, section 7. So I guess I'll just ask a general question. What support structures do you have in place for your ESOL students?
The general support structures, depending on the course, we do have the English through language arts through ESOL, excuse me, depending on the students, the population that we have, their classification. In-class strategies as well with all our educators, training at the beginning of the year. These are standard for every school. And then depending on the population, if you have a larger population, obviously it's more needs-based. We depend on what's going on there, then those are given. But the standard is obviously the WIDA assessments at the beginning of the year, classification, progress monitoring throughout the year.
Okay, seeing no further questions. School culture and discipline, section 8. Any questions?
I have one.
Taylor.
Can you describe to us under what circumstances a student can be dismissed from Somerset West Vero?
It's my understanding that a charter school cannot dismiss a student, cannot expel a student from a charter school.
So you will not dismiss us students for grades or discipline issues, things like that?
No.
Yeah, thank you.
And I guess just to clarify, because I've seen this before, the difference between dismissing from the school versus expulsion. And accurately can't expel a student, but are there conditions that would cause a student to violate some kind of student contract or something where they could no longer attend the school? I think that's.
No, we cannot involuntarily withdraw any students from our schools.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Section 9, supplemental programming. On any clubs or activities? Okay, seeing none. We'll move on to the next major section, the organizational plan, and we'll start with section 10, governance, and I think I'll start with Ms. Diagre.
Thank you, and I'm going to ask you all the boring questions about corporate governance. I saw all the information about your board of directors that's set out in your application. I also had an opportunity to pull up the information in Tallahassee that was filed with the Division of State regarding your corporate structure, and there were some discrepancies with directors. I just want to run through them and understand the differences. In your application, you did not list two directors that are actually in your paperwork in Tallahassee, a Mr. Tony Morales and a Ms. Suzette, I think it's Suzette Ruiz. Where did those two individuals go?
Tony Morales resigned from the board, and Suzette Ruiz is actually not a board member of Somerset Academy. She's an officer. Yeah, she's the vice president, I guess, of Somerset Academy. Right. She's not a board member.
Okay, that's just the paperwork that was filed with regard to your corporate structure. She was listed.
As a board member?
Yes.
We'll take a look at
No,
that.
no, that's, I just want to understand the differences in the names. And then Mr. Bernard Kimmel is someone new that's listed in your application but not in the paperwork in Tallahassee. Can you explain who he is?
He's a new board member. He's a former state rep and was he superintendent? A former superintendent of schools.
So someone who's newly joined your board of directors.
Brand new to the board. Yes.
Thank you. So I'm sure with your next update to Tallahassee, all of that will be fixed. I just wanted to run through some of those names with you.
Yeah, the annual report's going to be revised by May 1st.
Correct, correct. And I also noticed, and we've had this conversation before, that 3 of your board members are out of state. That gives you, let's see, you have 8 board members listed, 3 of them being out of state, leaves you with 5 here to regularly be able to grab onto, if you will, for various meetings. The 3 out-of-state board members, how frequently do they attend meetings here with regard to Florida business?
I wouldn't know the exact number, but they call in regularly. Every once in a while, they'll call in and they call in, participate.
Yeah, I mean, Lewis never misses,
regularly.
Lewis calls into every meeting. He and George are in Texas, and they're part of our Texas board. David Concepcion is in California, but his family is in Miami.
Oh, I
So
see.
he travels all the time.
Back and forth. So if they're not physically located here in Florida, do they regularly attend meetings telephonically or
Yes.
some electronic method?
Correct.
And I think I noticed something new in your paperwork, but maybe I missed it the last time I took a look at your corporate structure. You have a provision that allows or requires a 15-year term limit for board members, which I don't remember seeing before, but that's fine. Do you have anyone bumping up against that 15-year term?
I don't believe we have anybody close, but we've had someone that long before. Like a lot of rules, you find it's a good reason to have a term limit.
And that's
Just
what I was
good governance to have term limits.
And I'm certainly not questioning your decision to include that in your rules. I was just curious if suddenly you're going to be missing everybody. Okay.
No, we're staggered.
Yeah.
Excuse me?
We're staggered.
We're
as well.
staggered.
So
We're
no one-
staggered, and I don't think we have anybody within 5-10 years of that. So.
Very good, thank you for that. And I also noticed that you had a step-by-step process for conflict resolution with parents, and you have various layers. I think I had this discussion with you the last time, and I'm going to have it again. The very last step with a parent conflict between either a school or a principal or something involving a parent and their student, the very last step is, of course, to come to the board at a meeting. How frequently are you planning to have meetings here in Indian River with regard to business, where a parent could step up to the microphone and have a discussion with you?
At least two.
At least 2 annually, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
And we also we make a regular habit of having all of our principals call into all of our board meetings, and everything's noticed, and we have a provision to allow someone to speak telephonically to the board if that's necessary. And we always ask for public input.
And just to add to that, in addition to maybe not on those specific occasions, but we would call a special set meeting. So in certain instances, in certain circumstances, the board will make a decision. If an issue of that nature came, we would call a special set hearing, special set meeting.
From a policy perspective, with a parent who perhaps has an issue either with regard to their child or the principal or a personality issue that they wish to speak to the board, from a policy perspective, do you think it's the best way to resolve conflict to do that over the phone in a meeting as opposed to a face-to-face discussion?
I would think it depends on the issue. I mean, I can tell you personally, I get every email, every complaint email that comes in, and I reach out to them and give them my cell phone number. So that's not ideal, but we attack it immediately. And then if it escalates from there, as Charles said, if it's necessary, we'll have a special meeting to deal with it.
Thank you.
Mr. Taylor?
Thank you. So I see that you guys will have a school advisory council that's separate than the school board. Do you guys follow all the rules and regulations in Florida Statute 1002.452 for that, or do you have your own special code for school advisory councils?
No, we follow the Florida's code.
Okay.
In section 10? Okay, section 11, management and staffing. Questions? I had one on page 94. I noticed you talked about subsidizing college classes. What does that look like? Staff.
The network of Somerset does actually subsidize college classes for employees. It is part of their benefits program.
Is it like a credit, they pay for credit hours or something? Or?
That is correct.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Section 12, human resources and employment.
Yes, I have some questions on this one, Mr. Chair. What percentage of teachers and administrators' evaluation will be determined by student-level data? I know in here it says at least 1/3. Do you know how typically you would do that for those evaluations?
I was going to ask you to restate the question. I wasn't clear on the question. I'm sorry.
So in your application, it says at least 1/3 of a performance evaluation will be based upon data. So what is the actual number that you do for teacher and administrative evaluations?
It is 1/3 of it is,
So you do 1/3?
yes,
Okay.
1/3 is based on student data, correct.
And what data do you use for teachers of kindergarten through 2nd grade?
So we currently use SAT data to determine adequate growth.
The SAT 10? SAT 10?
Correct.
Just, can I piggyback on that? So what do you do for kindergartners? Kindergarten
So-
teachers of kindergarten students, I should say.
So we use a methodology that is growth based on the mastery of the standards, and based on where the children come in, we have a diagnostic assessment using iReady, and from that moment on, we can determine, using iReady, whether or not they have made 1 year's worth of growth.
Okay. So you use iReady for kindergarten, then you use the SAT 10 for first grade, second grade?
Correct. And iReady is used for students who don't have an SAT score for whatever reason, if they were in a different school.
What about like K-6-8 teachers, 6th through 8th grade teachers? What's their student performance based on?
FSA.
Do you use the state VAM model, or you have your own?
We use the state VAM model, correct.
And what about like a 6th grade world history teacher that doesn't have a state assessment? What do you use for that person?
There is a state VAM score that is assigned to those teachers, even if they do not have a course that is assessed based on growth.
I think it was a section I think I noticed you talked about in the budget and the staffing plan. I think you based it on an average of 4 or 5 year experienced teacher. What's your beginning year teacher salary? Just curious, what starting salary?
No, in the budget, we said exactly what you said. We did it at the 5 years, but
Yeah.
Looking at it.
I think it was around 40 something in the budget for.
44,000, which was your 5, and I think on your, we would match, in other districts, is match what the salary schedule is.
Okay.
For the district for the starting. So I believe you're at 40,750, I
Yeah.
think, something like that.
Yeah, for a 1A increment. Thank you. Any other questions in management and staffing, or human resources and employment, actually? And we already kind of talked about recruitment of staff, so. Section 13, professional development. I know we talked about that a little bit. I don't know if anybody has any further questions.
Just one, Mr. Green. On page 106, teacher evaluation training for administrators, training provided by the sponsor to conduct formal observation of teachers. So that, we would be the sponsor, correct?
Yes.
What framework do you use for your teacher evaluation?
We use the Marzano's framework.
Marzano, okay. And what about for your administrators?
It's Marzano also.
Yeah, Marzano has a component for administrators. Mhm.
Okay, anything else in professional development? I know we covered that early on. Student recruitment and enrollment, section 14. Talked about that a little bit as well. I don't know if anybody else has any further questions.
Suzanne took my question for that one, so.
No? Okay. Section 15, parent and community involvement.
I did have just one question. You mentioned in this particular section that Children's Trust and Amigos for Kids will assist in the holistic educational experience for students. Who or what is Children's Trust and Amigos for Kids? Can you just tell me who or what that is?
Those are two organizations that Somerset Academy Schools are currently working with. Amigos for Kids is an organization that is, their mission is against child abuse. And the Children's Trust, I believe, is more of a mission for homeless children, I'm not sure. But I don't know, I can get you that information, I don't know exactly. I'm not sure if Lily knows. But either way, those are two organizations that Somerset Schools currently work with.
And just to add to that, we are very, very, and I hate to use the word aggressive in a negative way, but we really reach out to all of our nonprofit community partners when we are in a district, and we want to establish with them, one, because that's a way that we can market and we can let them know that we are here and that, you know, we want to service all students. But at the same time, so many of these nonprofits are able to benefit our families and help them. And it's in the case if they're homeless, in the case if, you know, they're having any issues buying groceries. We have different schools or different districts that we work with nonprofits that work with families that their parents might be incarcerated, you know, so we do some type, during Christmas, we do the angel tree. For students that, for example, that have autism, we participate with the Autism Speaks so that we can do their walk. So we're very aggressive about working with finding our nonprofits and working with them just to bring back all of those benefits to our families and our students.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, we'll move on to the next major section, the business plan. And we'll start with section 16, facilities.
So just as a point of clarification, earlier we stated there was 18 relocatables at Glendale. The 5-year plan, our plan is correct, and it's 18 student stations. So that's one relocatable, one, not 18. So just as a point of clarification there. The question that I have was, in the lease, there's a long-term lease, and it states that the lease document will provide that so long as the school is meeting its rent and other obligations, even the foreclosure of the property by the developer's lender will not affect the school's continuing rights to possess and use the facilities under the lease. Can you guys just clarify that a little bit?
Yeah, that's in effect very standard lease language. What you want to do is protect the school, because the school signs a 20-year lease. And for some reason, if the owner of the property or developer, whoever that is, doesn't pay their bank and there's a foreclosure or bankruptcy, you want to make sure that lease stays in place.
So that's language in the lease that's going to state that
Correct.
you guys
That's
will
language
continue to
that
function.
Somerset would instill that's in the lease, correct.
Okay, fair enough.
And that lease would also have to be approved by the lending institution. And so what Richard was alluding to as well is that the lender would step into the place of the owner so that the school would not be disturbed. And so we have those provisions in our lease as well.
Okay, good, fair enough.
Good? Chris?
I just had one. In the section of your application where you talk about the average cost of the lease per student, you've given a price of $1,050 per student is what you're anticipating to be the lease cost. And then you go on to say that this amount is comparable to that paid by several other charter schools which have opened recently. What charter schools are you referring to?
It's taken into account the ones that Somerset has opened up in the recent, in the last few years. So you kind of back that up in effect of how much the construction cost is. Now, one of the things is that we're looking at, construction costs have gone up, so this could be something that we're going to look at different ways and maybe different, more creative ways to finance or to get into a facility, but that's based on the number that the current schools.
Just to be sure that I'm understanding. So you can't tell me that charter school ABC paid this much. What you're saying is this number is based on an average of all the schools that Somerset has been overseeing for the past, or the newly opened charter schools.
Correct, I would say
from Somerset over the past.
within the last 3 years.
Thank you.
Anybody else for facilities? Okay, section 17, transportation services. Ms. Idolette, thank you. And would you go ahead, I know you came in a little bit late, would you go ahead and introduce yourself for the group?
I did. Jennifer Idolette, Transportation Director.
Thank you.
My question would be,
I see in the plan that you speak of possible using private transportation carriers. Have you identified a possible carrier, or will you be relying on Indian River County School District to be providing those transportation services for you?
No, oftentimes a school district will provide the charter school with a list of approved vendors. If you don't have that, then the school would search for a vendor, and I know they go through background checks and things like that. So if the district has a list of that sort, we would go to you to get that to us, but if not, the school will find a private company.
So does Somerset, West Vero, do they plan on providing transportation to all students that may need it?
Yes, if a parent identifies that there's a hardship, or if it's in a child's IEP that they need transportation, then the school would provide it.
Okay, so is there like a mile limit, like anybody outside of 2 miles or within, you know?
So the language used in the statute is reasonable distance, and the schools typically work with the sponsor to come to an agreement on what that number is. I think it's, I don't know the numbers that have been between 2 and 4 likely.
I have a question. Does Somerset have experience with transporting ESC special needs students at other schools? And if so, can you run through that procedure with us? Is it contracted out? Is it internal?
So we do not have experience with transporting special ed students. Typically, we do work with our LEAs on that. The majority of the parents that choose to come to a Somerset school want to transport their child themselves. So the process would be, if that is the case, that we would need to determine based on the IEP if there's any aid or services that might be required. If the child, for example, if it's a child that we can service and that, for example, might have seizures, children with seizures we tend to possibly have with an aid so that they can be watching them. We want to put them in an air-conditioned bus. We want to make sure that if they're being transported, they're not in a bus a very long time. So these are conversations that we have with the parents in regards to, you know, how can we get the student to the school in a safe process. If the child is in a wheelchair, obviously we need to have a bus that has the wheelchair ramp, you know, and then we want to make sure that someone is waiting outside when the bus arrives so that the ramp can be brought down and the child can be rolled out. So, you know, and then if there's any, we always make sure that if we do have any bus aids, for example, we do transport, I would say the district where we transport the most special ed children would be Jefferson County. I think over there I would say that's our flagship of transporting children with special ed. And there we have even certain buses where we have not just the bus driver, but we also have an aide on the bus, you know, to ensure the safety of the children. And all of the bus aides get trained.
Yeah, can I just follow up? You said if you could service the student, then you would look at the transportation. Are there students you're not able to serve, or what, and how would you go about determining that?
So what happened is that for students that are very significantly cognitive delayed, remember we are a typical school just like all others, so if there is a student that is significantly cognitively delayed, then when we don't have a cluster or a program for them, we typically work with our sponsor to see what is the neighboring school that has the cluster and the program that can work with them. That's, you know, when we work under LEAs, those are the type of discussions that we like to have, you know, with our special ed department, and therefore that's why we want to work very closely with our students. But just like any other school, if a child with a very significant cognitive delay, basically we used to call them profoundly mentally handicapped, now we just call them with intellectual disabilities, where these children are you know, you're looking at tube feeding, you know, you're looking at toileting, you know, all of that stuff. Most schools are not equipped for that. Therefore, that's why we work with the district and our LEA to find the appropriate placement for them.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question too, back to the transportation. You said you provide transportation for students where it's a hardship. What defines a hardship?
I would say that it would be a parent request, because a hardship really can't be defined when you're talking about transportation. It doesn't have a one-size-fits-all.
That's what was making me think, you know, is a hardship that they don't have a car, or is a hardship that they're homeless and moving around, or is a hardship that they're both working?
Well, if they're homeless, we could certainly tap into the Bikini-Vento.
Right, so I was just curious, like, what defines the hardship?
Right.
Is it that two parents are working and can't get this student there, or is it that they have no access to transportation?
I would think that would be handled on, again, on a case-by-case basis, because what is a hardship to one family may not be a hardship to another. And if it's important to that parent that both parents are working and one of them would basically lose their job if they had to transport their child to school, because the most important thing, obviously, with children is above education is safety. So we would want to make sure that our students are safe in an after-school program or before-school program if that's provided by the school, which it will be with the Somerset West Vero. So those are options as well, and then the transportation would come along with that.
Right, and I agree with you. Hardship is different for everyone. That's why I wanted to ask if you had a defining point of what that was.
Okay.
Maybe the final question on transportation. So if you contract out or you use vehicles internally or whatever decision you make, who designates the bus stops? Who does your other schools work with to designate bus stops to ensure safety?
At each school site, currently, a lot of the districts that we work with actually require that through the transportation department, that you personally have to go in as a school administrator and provide the location of the student, and you go through, and you actually use Google, believe it or not, with some of the districts that we work with, and you determine where the students are located, and then the school-based decision as far as where the route would be. We have someone who handles the data to decide where those bus stops would be.
I think what I'm getting at is there should be coordination with Road and Bridge, County, FDOT, and of course abiding by Jessica Lunsford Act, and then you have sexual predator and offenders. Those are all the criteria that are needed to designate bus stops. So what is the policy at the other schools in existence that they're using to ensure the bus stops meet this criteria and are safe?
Okay, I apologize. I thought that Adri had sort of answered that when she said that would they go through background checks and everything with regard to busing, but same thing goes with the stops as well. Obviously, we have to follow all of the laws that are in place for determining where those stops would be, but in terms of deciding the general location, we use the map provision to decide where those stops would need to be. I thought that was what you were asking, more of a technical question with regard to physically where would those stops be in relation to where the students live and where the school is. So, but yes, absolutely, you're 100% correct. And of course, coordinating with the district, I would imagine that our first choice would be to work with the district and to contract with the district for transportation services. And if that's not available, then we would need to go through all of those routes that you mentioned as well.
Do you have a question?
I did. There was a brief reference in this section to a parental involvement agreement. What is that? What is a parental involvement? I mean, if you're looking for the specific reference on page 116, right at the very end, right before you get to section 18, there's just a brief reference to the school's proposed parental involvement agreement.
The parental involvement agreement, it's just the agreement that all of the schools have where you're asking a parent to participate in their child's education, because your parental involvement, as we know, is the most important factor in a child's education. So we want to encourage that through the encouragement of volunteer hours and reading to their child at night, participating with their homework. There's a checklist typically that's provided to the parents to say that we ask that you would participate with, in your child's education. In the same way that a lot of districts as well provide these kinds of checklists for parental involvement, but there's no contract that if someone doesn't abide by this contract, that the student would be removed from the school, as we talked about in the parent volunteer section. There is nothing like that. It's just an agreement with the parent that the parent is taking an interest in their child's education, and this is how they would do that. They're giving them sort of examples and provisions for getting involved.
Food service. Any questions from?
I have one question in reference to it. In your application, it speaks about the National School Lunch Program, but it doesn't mention anything about the school breakfast program. Are you planning to have a school breakfast program on site?
We will follow whatever the National School Lunch Program has available through the district. Our experience in working with different districts is that different districts have different provisions for that. Some districts contract with us for school service, others do not. whatever we are able to do, we're going to give the kids every possible opportunity that we can. So yes, to answer your question, if it's available through this district and we can provide that service to our students, we will absolutely do that.
Some food service? School safety and security. Section 19, Mr. Tessie?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Section 19, I just have a few questions. So specifically, the Jessica Lunsford Act, what is done specifically at schools to ensure this is adhered to? Not what the state requirements are, but what is done specifically, procedurally at Somerset schools to ensure this is adhered to?
All of the Somerset schools are required to have a login. I can't remember off the top of my head right now what the computer program is.
Concierge pad.
Okay.
I'm sorry?
They use some schools use different programs, so I'm not sure with the Somerset which one you guys use. It's
an ID checking
ID
station.
checking system that districts use, that Somerset schools use, that the kids or the parents, whoever comes into the building, have to sign into this system, and it does do the background check for the school. That's the system that's used,
Correct.
right?
You're given a badge, then.
Yeah, you get a,
there's
it prints out a
printout
badge for you. I'm sure you guys.
Says where you're allowed to access, which buildings you're allowed to access, and what access you're allowed to have on the campus.
And how often is your program, the database, updated?
I think it's continuously, it's an online program.
It's
It's an online,
It complies with, it's a program that's used by other districts within the state, and it complies with all of the state regulations with regard to how frequently those background checks are updated. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I want to say it's every 6 months, I think, is what the state has. I'm not really sure. It sounds like a long time, but whatever the length of time that the state, it is a program that is approved by districts within the state of Florida.
So when you say background checks, are you specifically saying running programs to check predator and offenders in the state of Florida, or are you doing criminal background checks on your visitors?
What program does Indian River County use?
Use the Raptor system.
Raptor system, that's the one I was trying to think of. That's exactly it.
It doesn't do background checks, it scans for
it's scanning.
predator and
Right.
offender
It's scanning those names on
updates.
the list.
Right, that's what we use for our visitors on campus, is the Raptor program. If you're referring to staff, our staff have to go through the district background checks as the same way that any other district employee would have to go through them.
Not only that, any third-party vendors, if they come on our campus, they also have to have the Jessica Lunsford background check as
That
well.
also goes for field trips or any contact with children,
Or parent volunteers as
parent
well.
volunteers.
So that, we have an active system.
So other Somerset schools are required to have the Raptor system in place?
Yes.
That's correct. Okay,
My
thank you.
understanding, every single one does.
Could someone please explain to me the difference between a school safety plan and a security plan?
Well, each school has to have a crisis plan. So you have your crisis plan that's put in place to identify who's going to be in charge of the various components of the crisis plan. And in addition to that, there's the fire drills, the tornado drills, the various drills that you have to do, bomb, code white, code red, code yellow, whatever. All of those drills have to be done, and that is written into the crisis management plan. The safety and security plans can be more site-based, and as a matter of fact, one of the things that Somerset is actively involved with now after February the 14th is getting involved in the restructuring and redesigning some of the safety components of all of the schools. And in fact, Academica as a support company is actually hiring someone on staff to be someone who's a head of security to help all of our schools and support all of our schools with these kinds of safety plans that are both site-based and then across the network as a whole.
What updates and changes has Somerset occurred or implemented since House Bill 7026 was pushed out? What changes specifically have you made and are you planning on making?
And it could probably.
Well, that's exactly what the meeting that I just referred to was about. We discussed the implications from a budgetary standpoint, how it's going to affect the budgets and what will need to be done in terms of hiring resource officers and what that's going to look like, hiring counselors, what that's going to look like. There has been a meeting of all of the principals and board members from Somerset to discuss this. There was an action tool that was put out to do an assessment for each one of the campuses to determine what the individual campus needs look like at this point. And then part of the provision was to put bids out to all of these different organizations to see if we wanted to hire a company, a consulting company, to come in and do an assessment of the campuses. So there has been a lot done in response to an action plan for putting something in place going forward with with this new plan.
If I can jump in, something we did on a much smaller scale as a pilot program, but down in Key West, they implemented a text alert system where the children have an anonymous way to text everything from security to suicide to things like that. And it's been quite successful, and we're looking to run that out through the system as well. So we've tried to do a lot immediately, not just sit in committees and talk about it.
Yeah, we've even looked at, closed circuit walkie-talkie systems for communication. We've looked at, each campus individually to determine those specific needs, because all of our campuses are very different. Some facilities are leased, some facilities are owned, so each facility isn't the same. We're in many different districts. We coordinate with the municipalities, as you know. Instead of using the district's police force, we have to use the different municipalities, which is quite extensive.
The program that we're using in Key West, which, we're going to be using with all of our Somersets, it's called School Text Tips, and it texts directly to the principal. We were chosen in Key West to pilot the program, and it's just phenomenal the way that we're getting all of this information in an anonymous way, so that the students feel, they can text this line, which goes to the principal, and I heard this, I saw this, and then like that, it just puts us on alert so that we can be aware of something that might happen.
If I could fill in one other thing that Kendall had mentioned, that some districts we work directly with them on security, other ones are not as cooperative. I would certainly hope that this one, there should be no politics when it comes to the kids' security, and we would want to work directly with you, and there should be no barriers when it comes to that.
If I can reference section 19, the first sentence, the school's detailed plan for school safety and security for students. And if we move halfway down into the paragraph, procedures and plans will be provided to teachers and staff throughout the faculty handbook, and parents and community members will receive information regarding emergency procedures, newsletters, handbooks. What is Somerset's opinion on publishing emergency procedures to the public in contradicting with school safety?
Well, I would think that that's two separate issues. The procedures you would give, and I'm a little out of line here, but what we're going to give to the parents is what happens in an emergency. How do you communicate with the staff and everything else? We're not going to publish the internal documents of what goes on inside the school, because that obviously would be good for the bad guys. Yeah.
Right, and some documents are public record, obviously, so some of those documents we're not able to keep from public, like the building plans and things like that. There are some things that we don't have an option to keep away from the general public. I don't think that this is in contradiction. For example, having a parent show up because their child has access to a phone and has texted their parent that there's a code red drill, and the parent showing up at the school because they don't understand that during a code red, we're not going to let them in, could be a problem, because now you've got a parent out in your, parking lot trying to get into the school when you may have a real situation going on in your school, or even if it's a drill. So, communicating this to parents and even training our volunteers, we think is very important, because our volunteers, if they're on site and we have an incident or even a drill, the volunteers need to know how to act in those situations.
And my final question, thank you. Attachment FF, in the binder, it stated there would be a detailed plan. Has that been left out for security purposes? FF is a supplemental material list in the back of the binder. Was that left out on purpose?
It was actually just an oversight. We apologize, and we can provide that to you.
Thank you.
Mr. Morrison?
Thank you. A lot of what I'm going to ask about, we've already kind of touched on, but just to go through my notes, we've discussed, the Jessica Lunsford Act and, the critical nature of security at our schools. The budget reflects $300 per month for a school of 419 students, or $3,600 per year, which seems kind of low. Given the particular emphasis on security recently, how could we explain this allocation? The revenue on the revenue page is $10,158, but the expenditures that I saw was $3,600. Can you tell me where the difference went, or am I not seeing that correctly?
That actual line item is just for the alarm system that you would pay. So that's just for the alarm monitoring. That's not, above that, you have purchase services, which would be if you're hiring some outside security. And that included in there, you have about $55,000 that's available to that between the custodial and security.
I'm on page 457. And under operation of plant,
Correct.
there's
So-
security services at $3,600. So
Yeah, so
where's
it-
the purchase services?
So just above that, 3 lines above that.
All right, got it.
Yeah, under staffing, I believe there is $20,800 listed under operation of staff under salaries, which says custodians, crossing guards, and security.
Okay. Anything else on school safety and security?
Do you intend to have like an SRO at each of your schools? I know this is 18-19 funding, and when you did this is based on 17-18, but.
Yeah, I would say going forward that the security line would definitely have an additional expense item on it. I mean, subsequent to that, there's no way you'd operate a school without that.
Okay. Well, Mr. Morrison, good introduction, because we're moving to section 20, budget.
Yes.
Unless someone
So
else wants to start.
It's my understanding that Mr. German is going to be answering all the financial questions today. As I mentioned, most of my questions had mostly to do with clarifications. I didn't want to assume that, just like with the security, I didn't want to assume that a particular line was pertinent to a certain activity. Maybe there's something there that I just missed, and I just wanted to ask you to point it out to me. First of all, I'd like to thank you guys for printing the budget aligned on the pages. That was really good this time around for us to kind of be able to see everything on one page. My first question just really has to do with some clarification around professional development. On page 2, which is the II Roman numeral 2, it talked about the leadership development program for aspiring administrators and the new teacher academy. We talked a little bit about onboarding. I just wanted to clarify that that's included in the staff development budget on page 455.
I would say yes, it is
It's
correct.
included, but I think there's a lot of it that comes through the support that you have
Yes.
from academic. So I think, and then the support of the network, that's really part of the services that are provided. But I think you can talk in more detail.
It does say workshops, trainings.
Correct.
Okay.
In addition, we do like to access the state's leadership programs as well. For example, the Brian Dassler Leadership Academy. We do have several principals that are participating in that academy. One of them this year is our principal in Somerset, Jefferson County. So we are always on the lookout of what the state is offering in regards to leadership. We know that ESSA has a lot of emphasis on leadership as well. So anything that the district or the state is trickling down, we're going to take opportunities for our leaders to, and aspiring leaders to take advantage of.
My next question, we talked a little bit about the marketing plan, and again, on page 2, Roman numeral 2, talks about the marketing plan to implement a diverse enrollment and marketing plan to achieve a racial and ethnic balance. In this area, it talked about of the school district. On page 4, it talked about the application states that the school will serve a population that is reflective of the surrounding community and traditional public schools. And on page 57, it kind of expands to the local community. page 109, it says the district and the community. Just wanted to make sure that I was able to point my fingers on where the line item for the marketing plan and the recruiting is located in the budget. If you could just point me to that.
It's under the startup budget.
On the
There's a
startup
lot-
budget, okay.
Yeah, because that's happening before the July 1st, so there's a bounce there. And then also in that startup budget, one of the things that's not included is any charter support program grants.
Okay.
So if the school were to receive the CSP grant, which most of the Somersets have, that would be significantly augmented off of that, so there would be additional.
That's the 25,000.
It would be the 25,000 is the additional one, but you also have up to about 300,000 to 400,000.
Yep.
And then, but none of that revenue is included because, again, it's a competitive grant, so we don't take those into account.
We talked quite a bit about technology, and I believe there was some conversation, particularly around iReady diagnostic testing for reading and math. On pages 24 and 25, we talk a little bit about Study Island, USA, Test Prep. I kind of didn't pick up on, again, a line item for funding in the budget for this diagnostic test and instructional materials. We currently purchase iReady at about $230,000, $31,000 for K through 5. So could you just point me in that direction where that's located?
That would be under the instructional. There's a separate line item called supplemental instructional materials, and
Right.
we budget about $23,000 for that.
Okay, got it.
And there's also beneath that digital education content materials. For $48,000 for that.
Just not wanting to assume anything, I just want to clarify where that is. Okay. There was also conversation about technology on page 20, and throughout the application, that the applicant intends to equip its classrooms with the latest technology such as multimedia, high-speed computers, other hardware, high-speed internet access. The school will utilize the latest interactive panels, clear touch and/or Promethean boards, document cameras, and various integrated learning systems. Can you point out the area in the budget where these are funded? Kind of noticed that there was no budget either for media services, so if you could just point me to where that is.
Okay, that's the line item that you have that in. There's a couple places where we have it, and there's a description to those. One is, foremost is under the instructional where you have computer equipment. Now, under this scenario, without the CSP grant, it's assumed that the Somerset will go ahead and lease.
Yep.
In Somerset, because of its significant fund balance, it has a line of credit with Chase where they're borrowing at around 2.5%, which is unheard of for any charter school. So they're able to go ahead and lease those equipment, and that lease number that you have there is sufficient enough to support the amount of equipment described in the application.
Okay.
To go back to the, I'm sorry, to go.
Take one of these questions?
To go back to the other computer part too, there is an instruction-related technology section as well that talks specifically about assessments and hardware maintenance. We left that out in our conversation. I just wanted to bring it up.
Sure. Okay. Page 23, we talk about each classroom will maintain a classroom library to include collection of quality literature, which includes written material at varying reading levels. Just for clarification, is that included in the textbook allocation under instruction?
Let me double check.
That would also be included under supplemental instructional materials. Yeah, it could be supplemental instruction, textbook, teacher supplies, depending on what it is that's being used. In charter schools, we don't often have separate line item for the media services. It's just something that we typically don't have in the budgets, correct?
Page 45 discusses, again, it kind of goes back to the recruitment. The application discusses a minority teacher recruitment at historically black colleges and universities. Just wanted to make sure where that budget lies. So I think we may have, go ahead.
Some of that is also included, and I think Richard said this earlier, in the ESP fees. Yeah, and the ESP and the startup fees. The ESP, one of the things that we do, and Somerset particularly does as a network, is sends this recruiting group I mentioned when we were talking about the colleges earlier, sends these groups of staff and Somerset employees out to different colleges and universities. So that's part of the ESP fees, a service that we offer.
Is that the
part of the- yep.
$450 per student?
Right. Page 121, Section 8, and then also Section D, it talks about the school will utilize the standard state codification of accounts as contained in the financial and program cost accounting and reporting for Florida schools known as the Red Book, all familiar with that, as a means of codifying all transactions pertaining to the operation, both internal and external reporting. Financial reporting will be subject to any directives issued by the state of Florida and the local school district. Page 45, the budget includes food services before and after school and capital outlay revenues and expenditures as part of the operating budget. Florida Administrative Code 6A-1.001, Red Book, Chapter 1.1 defines funds as fiscal and accounting entities with self-balancing sets of accounts. Funds are segregated for the purpose of carrying out specific activities or attaining certain objectives in accordance with special regulations, restrictions, or limitations. So let me walk you through what I'm getting at in English. The food service revenues are typically not accounted for as part of the general operating fund. So what I did was I took a look, for example, on page 455, just to get you there. You have the program revenues from the National School Lunch Act of $97,442.64. You also have paid lunches for $67,878. Those are for your paying students. So your total revenues from that is $165,320.64. If you flip over to page 456, kind of at the bottom of the page, you show the food service expenditures as $167,726.76. So in separating by Red Book rules the various funds, you would actually have a deficit in the food service fund of $2,406.12. The capital outlay revenues are $171,161.50, and they're included in the general operating FEFP revenue budget. Red Book Chapter 4.2 requires the use of a capital fund to, quote, account for and report financial resources that are restricted, committed, or assigned to the expenditure for capital outlays, including the acquisition or construction of capital facilities and other capital assets. I really couldn't find any functional category 7400, 74X, facilities acquisition and construction category of expenditures in the budget. So in an attempt to kind of reclassify some of this revenue and expenditures to the proper fund accounting, and I can provide you a copy if you want, I took the capital revenues of $161,161.50. According to Florida Statute 101172, there are expenditures that are eligible to be funded from capital, such as instruction. Under instruction, your equipment for instruction of $33,000, this is just the first year. Instruction-related technology, hardware maintenance, $8,800. Under school admin, your equipment rental lease, we talked about the leasing, $3,600. Office equipment under the school admin of $1,500. Computer equipment, $2,000. Operation of plant, property casualty insurance, we know that's eligible, for $58,000, and maintenance of plant, we know that's eligible, of $34,567.50. So the total is $141,467.50, which leaves you with an excess of revenues over expenditures, which would now be in the capital fund. So the resultant fund balance would be then transferred to the capital fund, if the proper classification per the Red Book requirements of placing capital revenues and expenditures in the appropriate fund were followed. Can you kind of discuss the reason for lumping that all together outside of the Red Book requirements?
Absolutely. And actually, I understood every word you said. So first, the easiest one I'll start with, one of the things we always have a challenge with is how do you present the financial information that is kind of more consolidated as you can. For regular reporting, district reporting, it will all be separated by funds and reported that way on your monthly financial statements. The accounting is done on a fund basis for the district. It shows each different fund on a different level. On the food service fund, if we were to do it, we would have to have a transfer and create a transfer line to basically subsidize. Most of the time, we strive to break even on food. As you know, like transportation, you would have a separate fund. You usually lose money there. In food, you try to stay break even. Going onto the capital fund, the one that you didn't include, which is the largest one the charter school have, is your facilities acquisition, which is a building lease, which is also eligible for capital outlay, and that is $439,000.
Actually, I have a question on that too, but go ahead.
Okay, so in that case, you would actually have to have, you'd have to have a transfer from operations into your capital fund to go ahead and fund that. So that's all done on the financial statements, all the financial statements that Somerset does. They have a software system that allows you to do it. They're able to look across schools, across districts, and be able to manage that in a very appropriate way, and it conforms with all the Red Books. If you go through all their audits, they have all clean audits since inception, so there's no issues there.
So just to confirm, it is the school's intention to utilize capital funds for the operating lease of $439,950. It's
correct.
Obviously. On page 12, the elementary program design includes music for K to 5 for 60 minutes a week. In addition, on page 38, the music curriculum discusses playing musical instruments. Can you, again, just for clarification and make sure I'm not assuming anything, can you point me to the line where those instruments are funded in the budget?
We don't have a separate line item for the instruments on that. What's happened, I think, at the school level on those music classes, I think you guys have fundraisers, PTA, that address those. There's fundraisers, again, a lot of it is paid for by the CSP grant.
And it would be part of,
bought a tuba?
so it would be part of the instructional materials, and, you know, experience says that musical instruments can be very inexpensive and very expensive and anything in between. So again, using the support of the PTSA, areas in which the community sees that they want to enhance the music curriculum, then we can do fundraisers and things to help supplement that. But the basic instruments that we could use could definitely be purchased out of instructional materials.
Instructional materials, okay. Following on, other sources of $41,900 in the revenue column, included in the revenue budget as a result of the before and after care program. Okay, it's included in there. Page 463, amongst others, including fundraising activities, field trips, and other internal revenue. Red Book Chapter 4.4-4 requires before and after care revenues to be accounted for in an enterprise fund, as they result from charges for services, you know, parent pays the fee, and are separated from general operating revenues. Red Book Chapter 4-22 requires the corresponding expenditures to be categorized in Function 9100 Community Services as a result of, and it's called Programs of Custody and Care of Children. That's actually defined in the Red Book. And I couldn't find the expenditures that are associated with the revenues for the aftercare.
I think that we
Function
could have cleared it.
9100.
Yeah, we could have cleared that up. That is basically the net number, that the 41,000 that's there. And then we're also very much aware of the custodial counts, which are your clubs or different things like that. None of those are taken into account because those funds do belong to whatever that activity is. So those do not flow through the income statement, and it's not available for spendable dollars for the school.
So again, you kind of touched on it a little bit. Red Book Chapter 8 also requires school internal funds to be governed by this chapter, and thus the revenues and expenditures from fundraising, field trips associated with the fundraising should be properly classified in those accounts. I'd like to move on to sort of a related topic. Well, not related, but it has to do with page 463 under instructional expenditures. It states that the budget for salaries is based on an average. That's the sheet that you provided, the budget narrative. It's based on an average. So on page 325 of your employee handbook, it says the school's intent is to offer salaries comparable to that offered by the public school system where the school is located. And earlier we spoke, you actually said that you want to match the salaries. That's what you said. So the average teacher salary, according to the funding, you had like 22 units in the first year, was $44,300. That's on the budget narrative, and it's included in the budget. And the benefits were calculated at 24%, which comes out to $10,632, and it all nicely ties together. And it's nice to have it on one page, too. That was really good. So the total teacher compensation after benefits is $54,932. The district's average teacher salary is $49,824, or $5,524 more. Our benefits calculate out to $15,144. So our total teacher compensation is $64,968 compared to the Somerset $54,932, or approximately $10,036 more than what a teacher would be working at Somerset would be earning in total compensation. Page 465 of the staffing plan, again, references those 22 instructional units, and it says 22 instructional units, ESE or ESOL, at 44.3, and 1 unit at 45, which is ESE or ESOL. When you take those together, multiply that by your 22 teachers and then your 1 teacher at 45, the disparity in income is about $229,960. If it is your stated policy that you want to match the salaries, how do you plan to rectify this disparity in compensation?
Okay, to be clear, what we're going to do is match the salary scale. So when you're looking at an average of the school district, your average tenure of your teachers is much older or much greater than we have as a charter school. So when we're saying, I believe we did 7-year, was the 44? Was 5 years to 40? Yeah. So if you're average, that means for Somerset coming into as a brand-new school, levels of experience averaging about 5 years is actually being pretty conservative, because if you look at your normal schools, you're getting younger teachers. You're not going to be getting a teacher that's a 20-year teacher at the district earning $65,000 or something like that, that's skewing your curve. You have a perfect bell curve right now because you've been in operations 100 years. The school here, your bell curve gets pushed to your earlier years, so I think having a 5-year average was a very conservative number. So I think with that said, we're there. We're not going to compete on the benefit side with FRS. Charter schools just do not have enough money to be able to do that. So instead of having the FRS, you offer a pretty generous 401k plan that's there, and you offer a generous health benefit program. So with that, Somerset has a proven track record of having very high teacher retention, so it's there. And I think having the pay that's comparable to the district, you're doing better than most charter schools are.
Okay. And then I have one final question on this section, Mr. Chairman. Sure, okay. On page 456, instructional related technology, can you discuss how support will be provided for technology issues? There's no tech guy included in the budget, or is that one of those supports that you get from?
There's a separate line item because there's 2 components of the IT. One is the general means, which is Academica maintains a whole big IT staff that does all the software integration programs and stuff. And then we do have, I think, under
Yeah,
plant and
info.
equipment, there's a separate one for, like the IT guy to come and fix something physically in the building, which is a much lower cost than the overall IT support that's provided by Academica.
Yeah, there's a hardware maintenance, instructional-related technology of $8,800 in the first year.
And then there's,
We did pick that up in the capital, but you're saying that's part of the support.
correct. And you have, under systems operations on administrative technology service, that's usually the service that's provided at the school level, but your big dollars on IT is coming from the support organization.
And just to
That's
follow up, no, I'll just follow up. I noticed you had a media specialist called out specifically. Are the other special, do you have other special area teachers, or is that just covered in the 22 teacher allocations, or is it?
No, you do have, on the staffing, you mean, you do have, as the school grows, you're adding additional support teachers and that.
But I mean, like, is there a music teacher? You talked about instruments, or is that one of the 22
Yes.
teachers that in the?
You're correct, because the idea is you don't have, for class size, it's your core classes, so you might have a bigger music class or different things, so that's all done through their scheduling. So that's the number of bodies in the building that will support the educational program that's required.
Okay,
That was my final question on section 20.
thank you, Mr. Morrison. Section 21, financial management and oversight.
This section was just some clarification on who does what. There are a couple inconsistencies in some of the sections, but just to run you through it real quick, if you go to page 119, for example, and it just kind of lists it out. My question is basically, can the principal sign a check up to $25,000 on their own? It was not clear in that section as to whether 2 signatures are required for checks under $25,000 other than the internal accounts checks. But when you flip over to page 122, it does say that dual signatures are required for all checks under $2,500. So which one is the real, is the correct policy?
They do have, there's actually Somerset has their own financials, policies, and procedures manual that was just recently updated, so that might be, unfortunately, my computer died and I didn't see a place here to plug it in, so I can't pull up the exact contradiction that you're referring to, but.
At the bottom of 119, read that. I think it says 2,500 has 2 signatures. Above 25,000, the board chair has to be one of the signatures.
Right. But I was.
Still has to be a dual signature.
Where was it? So disbursement packages are prepared at the school site, must be authorized by the school principal and include appropriate supporting documentation to substantiate the nature, account classification, and business purpose, and the amount. So principal puts it together, approves it, hey, we're ready to pay this thing. And then it switches over to internal accounts, all disbursements require 2 signatures. That's clear. I know exactly who, you need 2 signatures for that. For operating and lunch accounts, disbursement required 2 signatures for any check in the amount of $2,500 and above. Okay, so that's, okay, I get it now. Checks in the amount of $25,000 or above require that one of the signatures be that of the board chair. Okay, I just kind of misread that.
No problem.
Okay. On page 119, this is something that we've kind of talked about in the past. It really wasn't clear as to who does what. Again, it doesn't identify those functions, specifically who does what. It just says that they will be done. And so maybe this is just a section that you may want to beef up a little bit more. Maybe you have that manual you discussed. And I do have a comment that the manual was not included in the application, which I think may help clear up who exactly does what. For example, page 120 at the top, it says bank statements will be reconciled on a monthly basis. Really doesn't say who, by who. It's not clear who does that. Under the operational checking accounts, it says operating bank accounts are reconciled on a monthly basis and reviewed and approved by the ESP's manager of accounting or chief financial officer. Bank accounts shall not be reconciled by the same person managing the ledger. So it's just weaving through all of that. Then for clarification, on page 120, internal revenue collection shall be submitted to the school treasurer. Is that the same person as the business manager? Or that's just another
Depends
hat
on,
someone wears?
it depends on the school. It depends on the size of the school, exactly. There's different titles given to different positions depending on the allocation, similar to what a district has with regard to allocations for the numbers of students that are enrolled on a particular campus, the type of campus that it is, whether it's high school or elementary. So they have different titles for those positions. But one of the things I'd definitely like to point out is that with all of the schools that we work with in all of the different districts, they all work closely with the district and provide the documents to the district on the financial schedule and in the way in which that the district requests it. Most of the time, most of the districts that we work with have a particular schedule that they like for the schools to follow and a procedure that they like for it to be done in. And everything is done, you know, obviously in accordance with the accounting laws. So, I mean, we follow every, like you pointed out, red book, green book. If there was a purple book, we'd follow that one too.
But I was just wanting to make sure that it was the same person, and you kind of mentioned allocation, so am I looking to the budget for another position called school treasurer? I think you kind of answered it, that it's just someone who performs that role. I didn't also see a job description for the business manager included in there, and there is some statutory language around the financial administrative management of the school, including a reasonable demonstration of the professional experience of those individuals or organizations applying to operate the charter school, or those hired or retained to perform such professional services, and a description of clearly delineated responsibilities and the policies and practices needed to effectively manage the charter school. So it would have been good to have at least that resume, because you had your board members' resumes, that in there, a job description for the business manager.
Are these, including the financial policies and procedures manual, are these documents that you would like for us to forward to you? Because I can make a list of the ones that you'd like, or we can.
I'm not sure at this point of the application process that we are actually taking any more documentation.
Okay.
I don't think so.
I just, and I think that perhaps we can include more of the information in the section itself, but because we are tied to the page limit and we only have those 10 pages for the supplemental materials, it is hard. Otherwise, we'd be giving you a 1,000-page document, which we're happy to do, but I think we really are tied also to that. So again, we're happy to provide it to you now. Whether it's considered a material addition or not, I wouldn't know, but.
The manual on page 121, section D, refers the board's policies and procedures manual, but again, it was not included. This gentleman shows up on page 123. He's called a school director. He's mentioned under paragraph G under financial data security. That position was not on the organizational chart on page 325 in the budget. Can you say who the school director is? Or again, it's just a
School director would be principal.
principal, okay. And then the final question on this section, I think you answered this question, Richard, regarding the Chase Manhattan, but on that startup budget, the final sentence looks like it was cut off, as it just said that in the event that the startup grant is not awarded, the school can either use the resources from its network or has identified a not-for-profit charter school lender that will provide, and it stops there.
Yeah, that would be actually Building Hope that would provide
Building Hope?
that. Yeah, because Chase provides it on the equipment. So if the school were needing for startup, and right now Somerset has sufficient resources that we haven't done it anymore, but we've done it before for Somerset.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Section 21, startup plan. It's the last section. I know we've asked, huh? Yeah, section 22. I know a lot of these have been asked in other sections or areas. Anybody have any questions on the startup plan? No? So we do have a few minutes left. There's a lot of attachments there. You might have referenced those in your sections, but I guess I'll just open it up if there's any of those attachments anybody have questions about. Mr. Agresta?
I didn't. In the area, and this is really going to be to the governing board members. In the area with regard to your selection of Academica to be your educational support provider, there's lots of language in the evaluation instrument that we're supposed to use about your due diligence in determining who will be your education provider, if anyone, why you made that choice, kind of what did you do to make that choice. If you could just talk to me about that, about your selection of Academica.
They are a they have given us high quality services for many years. We do have an annual evaluation tool that we use to assess their ability to sustain and assist with our schools. And basically, we are extremely happy with the services that we've been provided thus far. And if in the event that we would find at some point that they no longer meet our needs, we'd be happy to search for a different company or find something that would. But at this point, we find that they are the best out in the market at this time.
Tell me about the annual evaluation. It's mentioned in your application. I didn't see an example, or I'm not critiquing you. Just tell me what that evaluation is like. Explain that to me.
So it reviews all the different services that are provided by Academica, and it requests for the board members to determine on a scale how well they think they are meeting the needs of the schools that we service. And so far, they've done an excellent job, and those evaluations come back very positive.
Do each of the Somerset schools fill out one of those application or those evaluation instruments? Who?
Yeah, well, the principals do,
Right.
and the board ultimately makes the decision. And like anything, when you have such a close relationship, the evaluation is an ongoing process. If there's a deficiency, you take care of it right away, or if it's not taken care of, it starts to build up. I mean, I imagine any vendor your district uses would be the same type of thing.
I can say something on the receiving end of the evaluations, is that we definitely have meetings internally to discuss the results of the evaluations and use those results to improve our performance and services that we offer our clients.
Yeah. If you'd like to ask the COO, Victor Rosso, how many times I call him.
Another aspect of the evaluation instrument that the district has to fill out with regard to this application for a charter school questions the capacity, whether you have received assurances that your education service provider has the capacity to handle another school. I'm not sure I saw that in the application information itself, other than you've shown us your list of charter schools. Academica has shown us their list of schools that they manage. But can you speak to capacity? That it seems that every year more charter schools are added. Every year more charter schools are added. At some point, I am assuming you're going to reach saturation for your vendor in providing the continued level of service you've been receiving. But I speak to me about your assurances that there's capacity to continue to add more charter schools.
I think it's a simple matter of scalability. I mean, as they take on more clients and more work, they can hire more people. They have a very good management structure in place and a very good template. And I think, as we've said, where Somerset has a great program of bringing up younger people and young teachers and administrators, I've seen that with Academica as well. I've seen high school students that are now working for them and have gone through college, have their master's degrees, and now they've come on board. So some of it's actually even homegrown. So as far as capacity, I don't know there is any, or there is any upper limit because of the scalability of that, and because the loyalty that I've seen within their organization and then within the same type of model at Somerset. That homegrown thing really gives us an advantage to keep growing.
And I think the greatest example right now is with security. I mean, you're able to have a support organization to be able to immediately react and be proactively now bring a whole security team, hire a security person on staff, that, again, you have that capacity. which is, then allows it, and you can see the team that's brought in to defend, and I mean, Ms. Salazar here is a prime example. They see that they needed better support on ESC. Boom, they found probably the best candidate to do that. So those are the kind of things that you have available to you through that type of organization.
I could say just one other on this thing, but it's very relevant. Key West was a great example. I think we talked about it when we were here a couple years ago, but Jefferson County, Somerset is now the school district. We run the entire school district. We couldn't have done that locally. The personnel weren't there, but because of our scale, we were able to bring people up from all of our networks and really make an amazing difference in that district. And that's kind of the advantage of the scale, is if we see a need, we can bring it up. Lily can come up for an ESE issue, or our computer people can come. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. And the only other thing I would ask is, Mr. Concepcion, I think is how you pronounce his last name, each of the board members actually filled out an information sheet on each of you to give some of your thoughts and beliefs with regard to education. In Mr. Concepcion's packet that he provided, he actually checked yes for an unauthorized conflict of interest and then didn't explain it. I think it may have been an error in the programming, because his sheet, for some reason, that question gives him a box to check for yes and a second box to check for yes. So it may have been just a problem with the programming of his particular packet, but I would ask that he review that. And if he does have a conflict of interest, to please explain how he's going to get around it. Or if there's just a problem with that particular page, if he could correct it and provide it. I'm not trying to get him in trouble with regard to conflicts of interest in the state of Florida. I just want to be sure that we're looking at the proper information, and that just kind of leapt out at me that there was an issue.
We'll cut his pay.
Could you just forward that to Mr. Taylor? I think that's your contact information. Not that he's not going to get paid, no.
Yes. He doesn't get paid.
Right.
All right, well, we're exactly at 4 o'clock, and it looks like we don't have any further questions. That timing was perfect. So, on behalf of the school district, thank you. I know you guys have traveled from various places, so we thank you for coming up and spending the afternoon with us and letting us take an opportunity to face-to-face get to know you a little better and what you're all about. And you read this in a lot of detail, but being able to ask questions and get clarity certainly is helpful, and you've been very helpful in doing that. And committee, thank you for the time. I know there's still going to be a few more weeks you're reviewing, so just let me remind the committee members that this is a sunshine committee. We notice it. This is our first time meeting. We haven't discussed any of this between us as we've gone through. Our next meeting is going to be on April 30th in this room, the Joe N. Idolette Teacher Education Center at 1 p.m. And you all have the criteria that Ms. DiAgresta alluded to. We'll be in the public going through that criteria as a committee. That won't be an interactive meeting. That'll be a committee meeting. It's open to the public. But that's where we'll be going through that criteria and discussing any recommendations or findings or anything. And at the end of that, we'll be coming to a vote on each section and then formulating, and it will follow the rubric, formulating an overall recommendation to the superintendent for approval or denial, and then that'll move forward to the board after that. So, with that, and seeing no other business before us, you have one question?
Yes, could I just get clarification on, I know that it was mentioned that we inadvertently left out attachment FF, and then you mentioned the policies and procedures manual. I just wanted to be sure that we provide you with what you need, but don't provide you with things that you don't want us to send. So could we just get clarification on what we should send?
You're within the word limit on the application, but it's an attachment. So I believe if you want to see the attachment, Mr. Morrison, they can supply, is that, it would be beneficial for you to see it?
Yeah,
We can
it
certainly-
was referenced in the application. I know there are some committees that don't allow any further documentation to be submitted. There are some that are different. I really don't have a preference after.
Yeah, as it is one of the attachments, if you'll send it to Mr. Taylor, that'll be fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we are at 4:02 and we're adjourned. Thank you.